Hi, I am Angelus Demonus, here to discuss my experience and impressions of the new Variant Dungeons from a strictly solo perspective. For my background, I have been doing solo content in Final Fantasy XIV, specifically Deep Dungeon Solo, from about 2016 to the date of this video and beyond. And I've also conquered all 6 Bozja duels on a variety of jobs. From the get-go, I knew Variant was not going to be difficult. The devs made that very clear from the teaser site to the live letters. So from that perspective, I wasn't looking at Variant hoping I would be challenged, but rather, what is Variant going to provide me as a potential hint at solo content going into the future? The devs have said in previous live letters that they will be adding more solo content into Final Fantasy XIV, and with that in mind, I definitely was hoping for something good with the Variant Dungeons. My initial impression of Variant was that the trash enemies were unimpressive. Trash enemies were fun the first go around, but when I shifted from the new content feel to the let's get all the paths done grind, I did semi-hope the trash enemies got cleared out at a faster pace, or provided a bit more of a challenge that threatened to defeat me where I had to stay on my toes. The bosses, on the other hand, were great. Initially, progging the first boss was exciting considering I was working with no information and I wasn't sure what kind of difficulty I was expecting. My impression was that these bosses weren't of Bozja difficulty, which is fine, but I definitely had way more enjoyment versus the Palace of the Dead or Heaven on High bosses. Also, having the ability to adjust the boss mechanics depending on the paths you take through the dungeon, or just a random chance it does some different mechanics was very cool. The prospect of those ideas being possible future content is exciting and I'm all for it. Would I want the bosses more difficult than this? 100%. After my experience of Bozja duels, those encounters are sort of my current difficulty high bar, and I really enjoyed those fights and their mechanics. But taking Variant as being advertised as the easy version, this had a ton of promise. If this is going to be the base difficulty of boss mechanics for easy, I can only imagine the stage is higher than this. Initial discussions with my community on Variant actions before Variant released had me slightly concerned from my experience in Bozja. The Bozja loss actions can get a little wacky with combinations, and sometimes trivializing the fights like the duels. Many gamers I knew opted for the speed kill strategies for the duels, and who can blame them when the option is provided? Deep Dungeon, on the other hand, had a certain charm to it trying to figure out how to clear on every job knowing the limitations of each job. Although, granted, in Deep Dungeon, we do have regen potions available to everyone, which compensated for any lack of healing abilities that roles such as DPS suffered from. The way the Variant actions were implemented, however, were made to be essential. Variant was advertised that these actions would compensate for abilities a job lacked by going solo. Due to the way the bosses were designed, I quickly discovered that there was no way I was beating the bosses without specifically Variant Rampart and Variant Cure on a DPS like Black Mage. Instead of feeling overpowered with said actions, or having so many of them at my disposal that I could make the content too easy, you felt like the 2 actions you were limited to were a requirement to beat the content. I think that was a good choice here. Although I had only used Black Mage for my Variant solo experience, I definitely would feel comfortable taking any job solo knowing I would be given the tools to win. Overall, my impressions with this new content is very positive. The only downside, in my opinion, is this content, Variant specifically, does not really lend to being repeated after you find all the paths and get all the rewards. Deep Dungeon has the thrill of the marathon challenge on multiple jobs, and a competitive official leaderboard, which entices many gamers to do runs well past their first solo title clear. Perhaps a daily or weekly tombstone reward would entice me to do this more than the first clears. But I don't hold that against this content since I feel this is how the devs wanted this content to be. So instead the question is, would I do the next installment of Variant Dungeons in a future patch? I say absolutely, 100%, because the design in my opinion was excellent and I had a ton of fun doing it fresh. There is a lot of potential with this content from the solo perspective, and I'll be looking forward to seeing what other ideas they have in store for us. Hope you enjoyed this video and my perspective, and thanks for watching.